On the morning of April 27th, 1983, a crowd gathered outside a shopping mall in Sydney, Australia. Lined up at the start were some of the best ultra distance runners in the world. Sponsored athletes, record holders, men who'd spent months training for what was coming. An 875-kilometre race to Melbourne, 544 miles, roughly 20 marathons back to back. Standing amongst them, in farm overalls and a pair of rubber work boots, missing his false teeth because, in his words, they rattled too much when he ran, was a 61-year-old potato and sheep farmer named Cliff Young. A reporter walked up and asked, half laughing, if he really thought he could finish this thing. Young explained that growing up, his family couldn't afford horses or trucks, so whenever a storm rolled in, he'd spend 2 or 3 days on foot rounding up 2,000 sheep across 2,000 acres. Nobody in the crowd thought that had anything to do with what was about to happen. They were wrong. When the gun went off, the gap was immediate and a little embarrassing. The professionals took off at a real running pace. Cliff didn't run in any way that the crowd recognized. He shuffled, a strange, flat foot gait that barely lifted his feet off the ground. By the end of day one, he was so far behind that most people watching simply wrote him off. This was a 5-day event, and the old man already looked finished. But here's the part nobody accounted for. Every experienced ultra runner in that field knew the unwritten rule of a race like this. Run hard for around 18 hours, then stop and sleep for 6. It's how the human body survives something like this for so long. Cliff didn't know that rule existed though. Nobody had told him. So on the first night, while the entire professional field set up camp and slept, Cliff just kept shuffling along. By the second morning, he'd clawed back hours of lost ground. He kept going. Word started spreading along the course. There's an old man back there, and he isn't stopping. By day 3, news crews that had ignored him at the start were racing ahead just to catch him on camera. By day 4, he had pulled even with the leaders. On what should have been a routine overnight rest, the front runners stopped to sleep, same as every night before. Cliff didn't. While they slept, he shuffled straight past them and took the lead, and he never gave it back. Cliff Young crossed the finish line in Melbourne 5 days, 15 hours and 4 minutes after he'd started. He'd beaten the next runner by a full 10 hours and shattered the existing course record by almost 2 whole days. His legs gave out almost immediately, and he had been carried off to rest. When reporters asked what he wanted to do first, he said he needed to find a bathroom. First place came with a grand prize of 10,000 Aussie dollars. In today's money, that's about 40 grand. Cliff said afterwards he genuinely hadn't known there was any money on the line. He just wanted to see if he could finish the race. But before the race, he'd quietly promised a fellow competitor named Joe Record that if either of them won, they'd split it. Cliff kept that promise, then kept going, handing out thousands more to other finishers, because in his mind, they'd worked just as hard as he had. That's a lot of potatoes, he said about the prize. He kept only a small portion for himself. What looked like an old man's awkward gait turned out to be remarkably efficient, because he barely lifted his feet. He wasted almost no energy bouncing up and down. Other ultra runners studied it afterwards and started copying it on purpose. It's still nicknamed the Young Shuffle to this day, and several later winners of that same race used it to win. Cliff Young never really acted like a champion. People would give him gifts afterward, watches and even a car for a courage award, and he'd hand them straight to someone who he thought needed them more. In his 70s, he tried to run all the way around the entire Australian continent to raise money for homeless kids. And he made it over 4,000 miles before his support crew had to call it off. He unfortunately passed away in 2003 at the age of 81. Back home in Beach Forest, there's a memorial shaped like a gumboot, and a multi-day race still ran in his name. Nobody trained Cliff Young to win an ultramarathon. He just spent a lifetime walking after sheep, through storms, never realizing that he was training at all. Sometimes the people who don't know the rules of a competition are the ones who end up rewriting them.